Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Dufferin-Caledon Federal All Candidates Debate. My name is Doug Harkness, and I'll be your moderator this evening. This forum was organized by the Dufferin Board of Trade with support from the Dufferin Federation of Agriculture and the CFUW, Orangeville, and Rogers TV, Orangeville. The Dufferin Board of Trade is a grassroots, non-profit, non-partisan organization with a passion for helping local business thrive. One of the ways they do this is by being the voice of business in Dufferin and advocating on behalf of business needs. Tonight's event allows the public to meet the candidates and hear their views on important issues impacting life and work in Dufferin County. The questions asked tonight are from the 50 questions received by the public from the public through our website. A small committee reviewed all questions received and compiled a list of those to be asked tonight, covering as many different topics as possible. Candidates were not informed of the questions prior to the event. Following the event, a short series of additional questions not asked due to time constraints will be forwarded to all candidates. Candidates' written responses will be posted on our website, www.dufferinbot.ca. We have 3 candidates joining us in studio tonight, 1 candidate on the phone, 1 candidate with a recorded greeting, which will be played at the conclusion of the debate. There is a 6th candidate running in this election, Stephen McKendrick, an independent, who did not respond to our many attempts to contact him. The forum will begin with each candidate's 3-minute introduction. We will then move into the question period, where candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Our candidates can view a countdown timer in studio on a screen in front of them. The timer will begin after the moderator has asked the question and will give a 30-second warning to indicate when time is up. As the forum comes to a close, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give a closing statement. Candidates drew numbers a few minutes ago to determine tonight's speaking order. We will begin with Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada and move on down the line. I will remind candidates that control of the floor rests with myself. I ask for your respect and cooperation in that regard. I will now introduce our first candidate to give her opening remarks, Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to the Dufferin Board of Trade. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm standing on the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Chinantati, the Atawandarin, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. I moved to Caledon 12 years ago, a music teacher and a mother. Over time, I saw more and more big projects proposed by big governments and big corporations, which would permanently alter the environment in our communities and impact our families, our neighborhoods, and our lives. Gravel pits below the water table, impacting our wells. Subdivisions approved without adequate water supply. Gravel pits, and on and on and on. And so what do these projects have in common? They are invariably opposed by the vast majority of residents in the affected communities. And where have our elected officials been? Both federal and provincial. Usually missing, hiding, ducking. That's not my style. I show up, I listen, I speak, I get involved, and I stay involved. That's what I want to do at the federal level on issues that impact Dufferin-Caledon residents, especially the urgent climate emergency and the climate crisis and the housing crisis. And I'm sorry, Mr. Seabag, but mailing questionnaires to constituents is no substitute for involvement. I want to be your next MP in Ottawa, because 1 or 2 new Green Party MPs will get a whole lot more action out of Ottawa than an entire row of backbenchers of the old line parties waiting for promotions and pensions. I want to be that new Green MP. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'd now like to introduce Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening, Dufferin-Caledon. I want to start by thanking DBOT for hosting tonight's event. It's a great part of our democracy to allow our community to hear from all the candidates, and I'm grateful for all the work that goes into these all candidates meetings, particularly in COVID times. My name is Lisa Post, and I'm proud to be standing here tonight as your Liberal Party candidate for the 44th general election. With multi-generational roots in both Dufferin and Caledon, I continue a long and rich history of public service, volunteerism, and community building. I was inspired at a young age by my grandfather, Alec Rayburn, and his passion for the Caledon Village area, where he served as a school board trustee, a councillor, and deputy reeve, and I've proudly served as an Orangeville council member since 2018. During this, my first term, I've been a vocal advocate for growing an inclusive community, and the foundations of all of my decisions, both at council and at the committee level, are based on conversations that I have with the community. I believe it's imperative to engage with all residents, whether our opinions match or clash. In these diverse conversations lies a solution. As I've navigated through the early stages of COVID-19 pandemic as a municipal councillor, it quickly became clear to me that I needed to be a part of the next phase of this pandemic at a federal level. Finishing the fight against COVID, impacting economic recovery by using a community-based approach, looking for long-term solutions for people and businesses who were affected the most, and working to move forward as a united community after we were divided through this crisis. I'm here tonight because I believe that more people than you and I understand that the economy grows strong when you take care of people. Encouraging innovation in technology and committing to diversity and inclusion grows our economy. We grow stronger and more resilient. We don't need to debate whether climate change, COVID, or the urgency to deal with both is real. We trust in the science. As your next member of parliament, I will fight for a community where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. I will be a loud advocate for $10 a day childcare and housing for everyone. I will be a champion for our green spaces with a bold plan for climate action, and I'll be an active partner with our provincial, regional, and municipal partners to ensure they are supported by their federal government. I'm committed to responding to the needs of our seniors who built this nation to what it is today, and as a military mom, to ensuring that our veterans and active military members are treated with the respect that they deserve. While I can't promise that we're going to agree on all of our policy, I can promise that I will never stop fighting for Dufferin-Caledon, and that's the power of a vote for Lisa Post on September 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd now like to introduce Kyle Seback, Conservative Party of Canada.
Hey Dufferin-Caledon, I have been your Member of Parliament for the last 2 years. And during that time, I've worked very hard to make sure I knew what the issues are that were important to you. I consider myself to be your voice, and that's why I ask for your vote. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've faced enormous challenges across the country, and especially here in Dufferin-Caledon. We have had really challenging time for farmers. I want to talk about that for a moment. Agriculture is the largest employer and contributor to GDP in this country. And there were some important things that happened in Parliament over the last 2 years that affects that. Number one, there was a bill brought forward to eliminate the carbon tax from farm fuels. The carbon tax has been very hard on farmers, whether they're drying grain or any other part of their production. Every Liberal Member of Parliament voted against that. It passed with the support of other parties in the House of Commons. Number two, we introduced legislation to make it easier to pass down the family farm to your family. And you won't be surprised, but the Liberal Party, every single MP voted against that as well. If you are a farmer or you rely on agriculture, the Liberal Party is not there for you. We also learned in COVID-19 that rural broadband is critical. And the plan by the Liberal Party to have rural broadband by 2030 will not be sufficient. Not only is that too long, it doesn't address affordability. We will have broadband delivered across the country by 2025. And we will take on the affordability issue by taking on the big telecoms that have a monopoly and keep the prices high. We are going to introduce competition. We are going to find ways to spur entrepreneurs, smaller internet service providers, so that we can get reliable and affordable internet. In the last election campaign, I promised a number of things locally for us. I said I would hold 4 town halls every year. I did that, even through COVID, some of them virtually. I said that I would ask my constituents how they thought I should vote on certain issues. And I did that, yes, partly by sending out flyers, also by hosting town halls, Also, by writing letters to people, asking them their opinions. That's important to me to know where you stand on the issues. And finally, I also made sure that I was there for the people of Dufferin-Caledon, and I met with my municipal counterparts to talk about the issues that were important to them. Every single mayor of every township. I'm asking for your support. It's been such an honor to be your member of parliament. If re-elected, I will continue to be your voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. We'll now listen in on the phone to Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada. Anthony.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to say thank you to the Dufferin Board of Trade for hosting this, as well as for Rogers TV for having us on their channel. Just want to take a second to acknowledge that I am in Canada, the greatest country in the world. Just let everybody know that this debate is currently being streamed live on Xammer Live as well. That's an opportunity for the viewers to take a look at my side of the debate. Okay, so if you log on to Xammer Live on Facebook, you'll be able to see me as well as the team. The theme of this debate, at least for me, is going to be incompetence. What we're seeing right now is we have a Liberal Party that is completely out of touch with the needs of the average person. They'll try to talk about how, continuing to spend egregiously will be good for the economy, but the reality is it's just going to end up indebting our children and future generations. The Conservative Party is going to continue talking about how they're there for Canadians and how they've always stood up for us. But, taking a look at Kyle Seebach's voting record, as well as the number of legislative pieces he introduced into Parliament, I'll let the viewers take up their own opinion on that. The Conservative Party has been incredibly, they've been moving so far to the left that they're basically the Liberal lights at this point here. What the PPC represents in this election is an alternative. It represents freedom. It represents being treated as an individual and being respected no matter what your choices are, no matter the color of your skin, no matter your race, no matter your religion, no matter your sexual orientation. Everybody that lives in Canada deserves to be respected because they are a Canadian, because they are a free person. The biggest issue in this debate is the basic human right to live freely and to have bodily autonomy. The PPC, at every level, will vehemently oppose lockdowns, forced vaccinations, as well as, vaccine passports, because the Canada that I grew up in is a free country. Good men and women died so that Canadians can live freely. And that is what the Purple Wave and the PPC is all about. I am so excited to share this with the people of Dufferin-Caledon. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Anthony. We'll now move on to our questions and remind each candidate that they have 2 minutes to speak. So question number 1, Jenny Lafortier will be the first to answer. Here's the question. What specifically will you and your party do to make childcare affordable and inclusive of all children, and at the same time improve wages and working conditions for early childhood educators?
One thing we've learned from the pandemic is how the economy is changing, and has changed. It's a gig economy, and so we need a guaranteed livable income. That should also include childcare. We need to control the cost of our social safety net. Making everyone line up at different desks for different checks is not efficient. We need a guaranteed livable income for those who continually fall through the cracks. Seniors were virtually ignored by the Liberal government during the pandemic. Many did not qualify for any assistance. We need a social contract where we take care of our seniors, both those living in their own home and those in long-term care, and this would also include mothers staying home who are not able to work because of the pandemic or because of other life choices that they've had to make. Poverty is devastating. It affects thousands. On any night, 35,000 Canadians are without accommodation. And social programs that can never accommodate all situations are expensive, costing us $20 billion a year. During the pandemic, there was a time when 1/3 of people were left out of receiving CERB. In fact, seniors were left out. It would be more efficient to provide a livable income based on location, building on the market measure, basket measure. Payment would be set at a livable level for different regions of the country. The federal government would provide an initial base level subsidy across the country, and an intergovernmental panel or body would determine and administer the necessary supplemental amounts. Allowing the provinces to reduce their expenditures on provincial welfare and national guaranteed livable income would liberate provincial budgets for the health budgets that they have asked Ottawa to support. The Guaranteed Livable Income Program would cover everyone, with the benefit amount gradually decreasing as other income increases. Seniors and children's benefits would remain in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Now we'll hear from Lisa Post.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. I think Jenny covered it right by saying that through the pandemic, we really did see the need for affordable childcare. What we got to see was the disproportionate representation of women in the workforce because of unaffordable childcare. So the Liberal government had already promised to instill $10 a day childcare. Before this election was called, they've already signed agreements with 8 provinces and are committed to signing the agreements with the remaining provinces, Ontario included, when re-elected. That $10 a day would take care of all families, regardless of income, and would be inclusive and accessible by everybody. The other part to this plan is that it will also bring more jobs into our economy with the hiring of significant number, 40,000 more early childhood education workers to cover those additional spaces that will be required. We've seen this plan work very successfully in Quebec and help more people get into the workforce. And as a mom myself, I know what the cost of daycare is like. And some days it's really difficult to even get up and go to work knowing that you're coming home and only paying daycare with your wages. So the $10 a day daycare plan is exactly what Dufferin-Caledon needs. As I knock on the doors, that's what I'm hearing from people is affordable daycare matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we'll hear from Kyle Seaback.
Well, I think it's great to see we all agree that affordable childcare is something that we absolutely have. I think what we have here is a difference in how we should enact that. And the fundamental difference in general between the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party on this is we believe in choice in childcare. We believe that money should go to parents. So, in fact, the Conservative Party was the first party to deliver money under Stephen Harper to families for childcare. And we're going to build on that by having a 75% refundable tax credit that's going to go to every family that will dramatically reduce their childcare costs. And it's going to allow them to have that choice. Whether that choice is to have a parent stay home and not have to have a child in childcare, whether that is to send your child to an in-home daycare, or if you want to send your child to a daycare in a center. The Liberal plan will only cover one of those things. The $10 a day affordable childcare is only for those that want to put their children in those childcare centers. If you want to have any other choice in childcare, you're left out of that plan. We don't think that's fair. We think there should be a plan that is affordable and accessible for all Canadians, and that's the plan that we're delivering in this election.
Thank you, Kyle. We'll now hear from Anthony Zambito.
Mark, you think I could ask you to repeat the question?
Certainly. What specifically will you and your party do to make childcare affordable, accessible, and inclusive of all children, and at the same time improve wages and working conditions for early childhood educators?
That's a great question. So, the first thing that I would say is, like, the way the PPC party is operating, we're actually advocating for smaller government. You heard the Liberal plan, you heard the Green Party plan. Their goal is to, create a completely inefficient government program that, like Charles Seaback said, a completely inefficient government program that will, take away the choice from parents. I'm not interested in that. What I want to do is I want to cut on taxes. I want more money in the pockets of Canadians. I want to give Canadians the choice and the accessibility, the freedom to choose whatever childcare service, is provided to them. Whether that be, like Kyle said, whether it be working from home, whether that be, having a child dropped off at a church childcare center, whether it be a privately funded childcare center, whether it be public, it doesn't matter. Allowing Canadians to have that choice is the best thing for them. Parents are the ones that are in charge of their children's future. They should hold on to that. There's no need for the money to go from the government to the people. It's just so much more efficient and so much more logical to cut on taxes and allow for them to make whatever choice is best for their children.
Thank you, Anthony. We'll move on to our second question. Lisa Post, you'll have the first opportunity to answer. Ontario is a top destination for investment, innovation, and talent. Measures taken throughout the pandemic acted as a lifeline to support employers and workers under difficult yet temporary circumstances. Now, as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis, Ontario businesses need strategic support from the federal government. What will your party do to strengthen the key enablers of competitiveness for our local businesses?
Thanks very much, and a great question from the business community. As we've seen through COVID, our small businesses, which are the backbone of our communities, struggled the most. They were the ones that were faced with lockdowns, continuous lockdowns, and their workers were unsure of when they were even going to be able to go to work. Going forward, we know that we're not through the pandemic yet, and we understand that our businesses continue to require our support. And one of the key strategies that the Liberal Party is proposing that we move forward with is ensuring that the hiring subsidy that was put into place under the emergency orders is continued and extended right through to the spring to make sure that once businesses can fully open, they've been able to subsidize and help with the hiring process. Next piece to that is investing in our small businesses in strategic ways through looking at sector-specific investments, such as in the arts and culture community, making sure that we're investing in travel and tourism and making sure that those small businesses are given the same opportunities to recover and thrive and move forward. When we invest in businesses in this way, we're investing back into our economy, we're investing in our people, and we're taking care of the people in our community that matter the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I now call on Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
The primary thing we have to do is we have to get people back to work. We know this. We hear it all the time. In fact, I've often been dining at restaurants where you see a sign that says, please be kind to our staff because we don't have many of them and they're working so many more tables than they normally would, because people are not coming back to the workforce, and we need that. So, number one, we have the job surge. The job surge is going to provide small businesses with up to a 50% payment of salary for new hires for the first 6 months that they're hired. That's number one. That's going to incentivize businesses to hire and get people back into the workforce. Number two, we have the Main Street business loan. It is a loan that is up to $200,000 for businesses, and up to 25% of it is going to be forgivable. Because what we heard loud and clear from businesses is the CEBA loan has not been enough, and many businesses have run out of that. There's also going to be a tax credit for businesses if they invest in their business. So some businesses right now are saying, I'm not sure we're going to make it. Should I invest? We're going to give you a tax credit to do it. And we're going to drive innovation, because innovation is going to be the key for a bounce back for all of our businesses in the country. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kyle. I now call on Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you. Kyle, going back to your point, I certainly hope that small businesses will be able to generate enough revenue to pay in taxes the money you're looking to give back to them. When you take a look, when you ask yourself, why are small businesses not being competitive right now? The answer is looking right in front of you. It's because of the government that we have. The Liberal Party has, they've been locking down businesses. They haven't done anything to mitigate the crisis as is. COVID numbers still continue to go up despite their best measures. Remember, it was only supposed to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We are now 18 months into this. That's what the Liberal Party is doing. And you take a look at the Conservatives, first of all, their plan requires a lot of central planning. Doesn't really sound like the fiscal Conservatives that I grew up with, number one. Number two, Kyle Seback has been in office for 18 months. Where were these policy proposals back then? Why are they just coming up during election time? And also, who's going to foot the bill for all of this government money you're looking to put into private entrepreneurs? Let me guess, the budget will balance itself, right? Who knows? my plan is I want all these unconstitutional mandates to end. The vaccine passport that the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are looking to create, guess what that's going to lead to? People are going to lose their jobs because of the bodily autonomy, because of their bodily autonomy, and they chose to take their health into their own hands. That is not what you want to do to get people back to work. I want to remove the barriers that are preventing people from getting to work. I want to remove the barriers that are allowing businesses to open. And I want to remove the barriers for the customers to enjoy those businesses as they should be doing. So that's what the PPC plan is, to basically take a rational approach to the COVID-19 crisis,
15 seconds.
but to allow for people to continue to live their lives.
Thank you, Anthony. We'll now call on Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
It's vital that the federal government strongly support Canadian economy, particularly small businesses, those hurt financially by COVID, as well as the need for job creation. All parties are pretty much in agreement with this, but the Green Party emphasizes the huge opportunity for really good, well-paying jobs in the green economy. Strongly support assistance for retraining for those displaced in the oil and gas industries and other outdated polluting industries. Like the people in Dufferin-Caledon, I am increasingly concerned about the cost of living. Prices are skyrocketing, particularly for food and energy. It is increasingly difficult for those on fixed incomes or low incomes to make ends meet. I don't hear much concern about this from the old parties. The Green Party has 3 priorities: protecting workers whose incomes and work lives are being disrupted by the transition away from fossil fuels, enabling the creation of new jobs in the green economy, facilitating the transition of workers from shrinking sectors into those jobs. The Green Party is committed to a just transition of workers. This will include measures such as income protection, job guarantees, retraining, resettlement. The detailed programs would be developed in partnership with workers and their unions. Locally in Dufferin-Caledon, there is urgent need to address the worker shortage experienced in the farming community and the expense to farmers who are using sustainable farm practices. We need to close the gap for farmers who are expected to provide food, land stewardship, sequester carbon, protect wetlands, buffering highways, all while we are, expecting them to increase their cash flow, and it's, just not fair. There is a need for education, for subsidy, better regulation, so that farm jobs are great jobs that attract the workforce. We need to value and recognize the importance of farmers and follow up with real action to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Kyle Seaback from the Conservative Party of Canada will have the first crack at the next question. From 1996 to 2016, Ontario lost 1.5 million acres of farmland, and our province continues to lose an average of 5 farms per week. What will your party do to stop the loss of farmland in Canada before it significantly impacts our local food supply chain?
Thanks for the question. Supporting agriculture is one of the most important things I think the role of the Member of Parliament in Dufferin-Caledon should be doing, because it is the #1 contributor to GDP and it's the #1 employer in the region. I think #1, we have to make sure that farmers don't want to get out of the business. We want to make sure that their farms are profitable. #1, that's why we brought in, for example, taking the carbon tax off farm fuels, so that they're going to have more profitability, be able to compete more. #2, we have to look at ways to make sure that they can get their products to market. We've had tough trade deals and tough trade negotiations with China and other countries for products. We have to be there for our farmers to make sure that they can get their products to market, so they want to stay in the business. And finally, we have to look at the ways that we pass down the family farm. For far too long, the family farm, it has been almost financially impossible for a young farmer to take over from their parents. And if it's financially impossible for them to take over the farm from their parents, then why not sell the farm? So these are the things that we have to look at with respect to how we support farmers so they stay in the business. With respect to protecting farmland, these are almost exclusively municipal issues because they're approving the building of subdivisions. We have to ensure that we protect the green belt, especially across the GTA. This is a vital piece of preservation that's going to continue our agricultural farms and stop the spread of development. I also think we as a country have to look at intensification in urban areas. We need to, for example, part of our plan to contribute financially to municipalities for infrastructure, for transit, is they have to build along those transit lines. We shouldn't be plowing through green space when we can build transit, and intensify. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada. Anthony.
Thank you, Mark, for the question. Going along with Kyle Seback was saying, I want to make farming less expensive because, it costs so much money to operate a farm to get your food to market that, it's an incentive to sell. And especially in Dufferin-Caledon, in this area, every town from Bolton to Orangeville to Shelburne, we're always talking about what do we want to do with our farmland. Do we want to develop? Some people do, some people don't. That right there is not a question that can be answered in Ottawa. That needs to be handled at the municipal level. But anyways, what can Ottawa do in order to, make farming less expensive? Kyle Seback scratches on the surface and he's talking about not applying the carbon tax to fuel. But let's get real here. Farmers are still going to be faced with the carbon tax when it comes to getting their food to the market, when it comes to purchasing farm equipment. It makes everything a lot more expensive. So the PPC is proposing to completely eliminate the carbon tax. We don't want to have a carbon tax at any level. We don't want to have a carbon tax for any product. That's something that affects the farmer. That's something that affects the commuter. It affects everybody. And, let me ask a question here to Kyle Seback. That sounds like a really great initiative you're doing, and honestly, I don't disagree with it. But the question is, why didn't you bring this up 6 years ago? Why didn't you bring this up 18 months ago before COVID? Why is this an issue now in this election? So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforce-Jay from the Green Party of Canada. Jenny.
Just on the carbon tax, carbon border adjustment could well be the single most impactful action that Canada could take to encourage countries to adopt strong emissions reduction policies in the fight against the climate emergency. And Canada should always be seeking to show leadership in international efforts for that. But on the farming question, I've been involved in trying to stop the 413 for 18 months now. The 413 is actually a federal issue. Because of the lack of governance from local municipalities and the province, we have had to seek a federal environmental impact assessment. That can only be done at the federal level. That highway is in review right now. We are waiting to see what kind of conditions that might impose, but we are hoping that it will be canceled, as it should have remained canceled. And the highway has proven to be very detrimental to farmland, prime farmland in Caledon. There are 60 kilometers of highway being proposed. The material for that highway will come from Caledon. They are extracting below the water table to build that highway. They are stockpiling gravel. We will lose wetlands and streams. We have lost several acres of farmland already. The land is being degraded as we speak, and we need our elected representatives to step up and pay attention to what we are losing during the climate emergency. If we want to talk about the housing emergency, that's another reason to cancel this highway, as well as the Bradford bypass. This is not the time to be building highways. This is the time to be incentivizing transit, getting people to work effectively, cheaply, and sustainably. That's what I would like to do for the farmers in Dufferin-Caledon, is protect their farmland and also recognize that they are extremely valued and they are at the forefront of the climate emergency. We expect so much from them, and the federal government needs to be helping them be the greatest farmers that they can be in a green economy and a sustainable way. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
Thank you. There is absolutely no doubt that agriculture in Dufferin-Caledon is the number one creator of jobs. It's our number one economic driver, and protecting our farmlands is a very, very critical piece of that. While those are mainly municipal and provincial issues when it comes to developing farmlands, there are a few things that we can do to incentivize our farmers to want to stay farmers, and for the next generation of farmers to want to be part of that. Two of the things that I can think of off the top of my head is, let's address the climate emergency. It's become extremely difficult for our farmers to predict what's going to happen because they're dealing with climate change. And that affects their crops, it affects all of their farming, and we need to make sure that they can have a reliable crop in order for them to be profitable. The next piece that we can do to protect those farmlands and make sure that the next generation of farmer wants to move into that family farm is to make sure that they have the access that they need to rural broadband. So much of the new technology when it comes to farming equipment is run on technology, and it's run using internet. That's how they manage their crops, it's how they measure their seeds, it's all of those things. And we need to make sure that they're connected and that it's made affordable and that it's easily accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada will have the first crack at the next question. The Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis indicates that basic income could grow Canada's economy by $80 billion a year, more than Canada's tourism and hospitality industries combined, and create nearly 600,000 jobs in 5 years. Does your party support a basic income program? And if so, how should such a program be implemented? Anthony?
The quick answer is no, our party does not support universal basic income. The long answer is because everywhere everywhere it has been tried, it has not worked. Take a look at the USSR. Take a look at Venezuela. Take a look at Cuba. When you have a universal basic income, it completely kills the private sector. It doesn't allow for innovation. It doesn't allow for market growth. It doesn't allow for entrepreneurs to make investments. Reason being is because there's so much central planning happening from Ottawa, from the government, that it completely kills, it gives them no incentive to grow. It gives them no incentive to hire workers. I've dealt with this issue, having family from Venezuela. The big issue there was that, people wanted to better their lives. They wanted to continue getting educated so to become doctors, to become lawyers. But the problem was with the socialized system, economic system that they had there, once they reached a certain point, they get taxed to death. The universal basic income is also not a good idea because it will keep people dependent on Ottawa. And that's what the People Party wants to stop. We want a smaller government. We want people to have their livelihoods back. Every individual is free to do as they please. And when you are reliant on the federal government for money, guess what? They're always going to be in your back pocket. We're seeing this right now with CERB. With CERB, it's completely eliminating the incentive to go back to work, and it's just increasing our public expenditure. So I don't know, who funded this study here, but when you take a look at what actually grows the economy, the answer is private investment. It always has been. That's the reason why, for a large portion of the 20th century, the United States was the biggest economy in the world. And going back to the climate emergency that was addressed in the last question, how come Obama bought a $10 million house right beside the sea if he's in a climate emergency? I don't know. So that's why I don't call it a climate emergency. That's why I call it climate change. Regardless, though, getting back to this, universal basic income will lead to the death of the private market and the death of the... Thank you,
Anthony.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
I absolutely support a guaranteed livable wage and income. I think it's high time. We have learned from the pandemic how much disparity there is between those that have and those that do not. I think it speaks to incredible entitlement to say that we don't need a guaranteed livable income. If you've been knocking on doors, you've heard from people who are making the terrible choice of whether to pay for their house or to pay for their groceries. If someone is eating cat food because they can't afford to put food in their fridge, I think it's time to tell you that something is wrong. As I stated before, we need a universal basic income building on the market basket measure. It is affordable. It's cheaper than various different welfare programs that often miss people. They fall through the cracks. They don't receive the checks that they need. The seniors did not receive CERB this entire time, and it was devastating for them. So rather than have all of these various different ministries that are cutting checks for different reasons, let's make it simple for people. Let's give them that basic income that they need so they can pursue the things that they would like to pursue. And if their income increases, then we reduce that. Then we look at taxes at the end of the year and we make incremental changes. That way no one gets left behind, no one is going hungry, no one doesn't have a house over their head, and we're taking care of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. I think that CERB was a really good test of the power of a universal basic income. And what I mean by that is that what that showed is that when we take the time to invest in our people and make sure that they have money in their pockets when they need it the most, they were able to continue to move our economy. We're now getting close to post-pandemic, hopefully, and what we've seen is that our economy is still doing pretty well, and that's a direct result of the fact that Canadians had money in their pockets to invest back into their local economy when they needed it most. So while the Liberal Party platform currently does not speak directly to a universal basic income, as your Dufferin-Caledon candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada, I am dedicated to advocating for that to be the next step that we take as Canadians, is to research and do a full outline of what a universal basic income would look like. It does get complicated when we start looking at different areas, and that will need to be done in a committee level to make sure that we're equitable across the nation. So I'm committed to researching and looking into a universal basic income, because I think when we take care of our people, we take care of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
So like the Liberal Party platform, we don't have a position on a universal basic income in our platform. I will say this, I think it's something that's very interesting that we should study. I think it's also very complicated. We have a patchwork of support programs, not just at the federal level, but all across the provincial level and even at the municipal level. So if you're looking at a universal basic income, I think you have to first, number one, figure out how it's going to work. Which programs are you going to eliminate? Which programs are you going to harmonize? And how are you going to implement it? Will there be regional disparities? Because a livable income in Toronto is different than a livable income in North Bay. So I think it's something that merits a lot of study. The challenge I think we have in this country right now with the universal basic income is the massive amounts of debt that has been brought up by the Liberal Party. I'm not talking about the debt that was brought up through the pandemic. We had to spend. We had to support Canadians. In fact, we fought to increase the wage subsidy from 10% at the start to 75% where it was, because Canadians needed that support. It was the unchecked spending that the Liberals did in the good economic years. They ran up massive deficits during that time. So now our national debt is enormous. Our debt to GDP ratio is among the worst in the G7. This is going to be a challenge for implementing any new programs, because we can't just continue to spend. At some point, you run out of money. So, interesting concept. I think we should study it, detailed study, figure out how we could harmonize it with the provinces and municipalities, and then of course look at the cost and see if it's affordable.
Thank you, Kyle. Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada will have the first chance at the next question. So as the pandemic has made it more apparent, high-speed internet is critical to economic viability and recovery. The Canadian government has committed $7.2 billion to broadband internet infrastructure. But the goal dates are 2026 and 2030. What initiatives could you bring forward to get our rural community the critical broadband infrastructure sooner?
So I think this broadband question has been kicking around Dufferin-Caledon for as many years as I've lived here. Every new government talks about broadband. As a taxpayer, we've been paying for SWIFT for years now and still don't have rural connectivity when there's a weather or when there's, some kind of event. I think looking at broadband is a bit of old style thinking. Starlink has actually already solved this issue for roughly $700 for an initial setup fee, followed by $100 per month. You can pretty much have 24-hour internet. And people are doing that. They're going for that. They're tired of waiting. It's been a long pandemic. If you have children at home on online school and your two parents working from home, you know the challenges of getting internet, and you know that there's a finite amount of money that can be spent in the family income for such services. I have neighbors who spent $1,400 last year between January and March for their internet bill because they work from home. This is unacceptable. We cannot keep doing this to our residents. So I think the governments need to step up and start thinking outside the box and fix this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. We'll now hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. I love that we're talking about rural broadband because it is such an important issue. My council counterparts in Caledon passed a motion at their council earlier this year petitioning the provincial and the federal government to classify access to broadband internet an essential service. I brought forward the same motion at Orangeville Council and was unanimously supported this year because it is critical. It's no longer a luxury item. It is an absolute essential service, and the COVID-19 pandemic brought that out. One of the things that's been going on in Dufferin-Caledon, because it has been a conversation for a very long time, is the SWIFT program, as was mentioned by Jenny. And thanks to some really great advocacy on behalf of our county counterparts, our Wardens Caucus, our Western Wardens Caucus, we have 5 broadband internet projects that have already been started in North Dufferin particularly, and those are looking for completion very soon, which is great. Without the advocacy of all levels of government, though, rural access isn't possible. And it goes beyond needing rural wireless access. We need to get fiber into homes as well. The Liberal Party is absolutely committed to continuing to invest in rural broadband. And for any of the larger corporations that have already committed to purchase those broadband installations, they're using a use it or lose it approach, where if they have an accelerated timeline to roll that out, and if it's not done, that will go back up to market for another smaller rural provider to take over, because it is absolutely crucial that we make rural broadband priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll now hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
I think rural broadband is probably the 2 words that I use the most in 2 years in Parliament, and there is a multiplicity of issues to deal with rural broadband. I'm going to talk about a couple. Number 1, the Liberal Party is in the pocket of the 2 big telecos. A discount rate was passed by the CRTC to allow for smaller telecom companies and wireless companies to be able to compete with the big ones, and the Liberal Party got rid of it. So what we have is a number of challenges. Number 1, their plan for 2030 isn't sufficient. I heard this over and over again through the pandemic. People calling my office, sending me emails. I'm spending $400 a month on internet. I'm spending $500 a month on internet. This is unsustainable. So there's 2 things we have to do. Number 1, we've got to get it in way faster than 2030. That's why our platform has a commitment. We are going to have every home connected by 2025. Number 2, affordability. This is the big one. It's not just access. You actually have to be able to pay for it. And some people can't pay $700 for a Starlink hookup. So what do we need? We need competition, number 1. We're going to open up Canada to competition from foreign telecom companies so that they can drive down prices. You look at prices in the United States or in the EU, they are a fraction of the cost of what we have here. We have to incentivize the smaller regional players, and we have to disrupt the anti-competitive practices of the large telecom companies. And that's also part of our platform. We are going to have the Competition Bureau look into the anti-competitive practices of the duopoly on broadband across this country. And if we do all of these things, we will not only bring rural internet, we will bring affordable rural internet all across the country, and especially right here in Dufferin-Caledon.
Thank you, Kyle. We'll now hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you, Mark. This is a good question, and this is a question I've heard long before COVID, long before this election. This is an issue that I heard growing up, to be honest with you, and it blows my mind how it is still an issue, regardless of the liberal government at the provincial level, the conservative government at the provincial level, regardless of both the liberal government and the federal conservative government being in charge of the federal government. All of these plans sound great, but who's actually going to put something into place? I agree. I think that Rogers and Bell have a duopoly not only in Dufferin-Caledon, but across the country. We are paying more than the developed world, than most of the developed world, for broadband, for telecommunications in general. It's not right, and we need to increase competition so that the smaller players can come up here. If they find themselves a return for their investment, investing in rural communities, then that's how we're going to see broadband get up here. Relying on the government to do it, where's it got us? It gets us into the same gridlock. Who knows? Maybe in 4 years, it'll still be an election issue for the future candidates to talk about. I think Sebak's plan is perfect. You got to remember, he's been in office for 6 years. How come he hasn't introduced any legislation supporting this? I couldn't tell you. If the People's Party of Canada gets in there, I am a representative for Dufferin-Caledon. So I'm going to be pushing for this issue at Ottawa. I'm going to be an advocate at every level because I'm still an individual who lives here. Me personally, I live in Bolton, never had to deal with it, but I've met so many people in rural Dufferin, rural Caledon who go with this all the time. I'm looking at people right now who go through this all the time, and the fact that the government still continues to wishy-wash this, talk is great, but it's time we actually walk the walk.
Thank you, Anthony. I may have been mumbling a little bit at the beginning. My name is Doug. I have a lot of friends named Mark, but my name's Doug. Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada will have the first chance at the next question. Bearing in mind that Canada has never met any of its emissions targets, will your party commit to an all-party climate caucus to develop a legislated, accountable framework for Canada to meet emissions targets in line with the urgent timeline identified in the recent IPCC recommendations?
Thank you. This one's going to be a pretty short answer, and it's yes. At this point, our climate action plan is the most robust of any of the other parties. We have aggressive targets and plans to meet them. And all of the new information that we continue to learn daily, we need to adjust and adapt quickly. Our planet doesn't have a choice. We don't have a timeline to move forward from. I would recommend that everybody take a quick look through the Liberal Party platform online because it is so comprehensive that 2 minutes isn't going to be enough to cover all of the components of it. But the short answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we have Kyle Seaback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, I'm certainly not going to commit to, we're always happy to have discussions with other parties. One of the things we know is that the Liberal carbon tax is hard on rural communities, and it's hard on the residents of Dufferin-Caledon. We don't have a choice if we're going to heat our homes with propane. We don't have a choice if we're going to commute long distances. The carbon tax disproportionately punishes people in rural communities, which is why we're going to get rid of it. And we have a robust plan of our own. We have a low carbon savings account where you are going to pay a carbon levy and you're going to get every penny back. Whether that's to use to buy an electric vehicle, whether it's going to be to use to invest in a more fuel efficient furnace. Any way that you can reduce your carbon footprint, that money's going to come back to you so you can spend it that way. So residents of Dufferin-Caledon are going to actually benefit from this, unlike the punishing carbon tax. Also, we are going to come forward with carbon border adjustments. Why is this so critical? Because if we're actually going to do anything about climate change, we have to have other countries around the world participating. For example, like China. And a carbon border adjustment does three things. That's going to be great for this country. One, countries that are not taking climate change seriously, they're going to have a carbon border adjustment on their goods coming into the country. That's going to make them more expensive. It's going to allow Canadian industry to be more competitive. That means more jobs right here at home where they should be. Number two, it's going to be revenue for the government that we can put into other things like climate change initiatives. And number three, it's actually going to get countries around the world that are not taking climate change seriously to do it. We have a real plan, and it's actually going to benefit the people of Dufferin-Caledon, the people of Canada, and of course, the entire planet.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada. Anthony. Anthony, are you still with us?
Yep, sorry about that. Doug, do you think I can get you to repeat the question, sorry?
Certainly. Bearing in mind that Canada has never met any of its emissions targets, will your party commit to an all-party climate caucus to develop a legislated, accountable framework for Canada to meet emissions targets in line with the urgent timeline identified in the recent IPCC recommendations?
Yeah, so the People's Party of Canada is actually committing to back away from international agreements such as that, as well as the Paris Accord that happened earlier this decade. One thing you need to know about the People's Party of Canada candidates, many of them are very, environment focused in that they are individuals who take care of their environment. I want to encourage this type of culture, especially in Dufferin-Caledon. Many of us have properties where we can be planting trees. That puts oxygen into the air and that eats up our carbon. That's a huge way to reduce your footprint. That's called permaculture, and that's a huge thing. In addition to that, too, a huge part of those IPCC commitments would be to institute a carbon tax. We've heard the Conservatives talk about how they're going to replace the carbon tax with their carbon tax, but no one's talking about actually getting rid of it. We know that the carbon tax, paying into a carbon tax, does not fight global warming. It just makes everything more expensive. In addition to that, too, in trying to get to those IPCC targets, we're also going to be hindering our natural resource sector. In this country and in this riding, the majority of residents still rely on fossil fuels in order to heat their homes. We want to be able to get the fossil fuels from, Alberta, Western Ontario, across the country, much more efficiently, much less expensively than we are currently doing right now. We talked a little bit about restoring the economic sector. That is going to bring a lot of GDP Canada's way. So many people talk about the climate emergency as is. I brought it up before. How come Barack Obama bought a multi-million-dollar estate right off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean if ocean levels are supposed to rise? How come bankers from downtown Toronto aren't moving their property away? They're billion-dollar properties downtown. They're not touching them. The reason being is because the climate emergency, some people like to think of it as an emergency, but it's a lot of climate
15
alarmism.
seconds.
If we all take care of our environment individually, that will go a longer way from fighting climate change than any carbon tax or any commitment that Canada made to the IPCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
Okay, a lot to unpack in that. I'm going to start with recognizing that I'm glad the Conservative Party has acknowledged climate change this election. I will call out the Liberals on the fact that one of the first things they did when they took office was buy a pipeline. And I will say to the People's Party of Canada, I think you should really read the IPCC report, and I think there are a lot of scientists that would severely disagree with you. Canada has been feeling the impacts of the climate emergency this summer. We had tornadoes just last night. Emissions are 21% above 1990 levels. Canada has never achieved a climate target. GHGs have risen in every year since 2016. Liberals bought that pipeline, and Canada is now one of the top 3 worst emitters of greenhouse gas emissions in the G20. We need to achieve net zero emissions as quickly as possible. The Green Party recommends, by following the evidence and the science, that we need to reduce emissions by 60%. We need to achieve net zero emissions as quickly as possible, aiming to be net negative in 2050. End all extraction of fossil fuels. Cancel all new pipeline projects, beginning with the Trans Mountain. Cancel all new oil exploration projects, including in the offshore. End leasing of federal lands. Ban fracking. We need to end all subsidies to the fossil fuel sector. We need to basically start phasing out existing oil and gas operations so that they can continue but on a declining basis. We need to ensure that companies are held accountable for paying for the costs of cleaning up and restoring land instead of passing these to the public. Canada has a global responsibility to conserve nature due to our high standard of living as well as our abundant natural resources. Global resources are unevenly distributed. Canada stewards 20% of the world's wild forests and 24% of its wetlands. We must do our part.
Thank you, Jenny. I want to make clear before I read the next question that it is not mine, and despite my silver mane, I'm not even close to being in the group that it talks about here. So it's estimated that 1 in 4 Canadians, or 25%, will be a senior by 2030. In just over 8 years from now, if elected, what immediate actions will you take to ensure that Canada's growing number of elders may live in safety, respect, and dignity? Kyle Seback, you're up first.
Well, I think what we've seen over the pandemic is that this was particularly hard on seniors because they did not have any additional income other than a small stipend that the government offered that they received coincidentally just before the election started. What we have to do is look at a number of things. Number one, how do we make it more affordable for seniors to stay in their homes? And that's a critical thing. Number two, we have to find ways to make sure that long-term care is safe and affordable for seniors. Number three, we have to look at ways to make sure that income and sources of support that go to seniors keep up with inflation and are enough that they have a proper standard of living. With all of these things taken place, I think we're going to be able to absolutely take care of our seniors and deal with our growing population in the senior segment.
Thank you, Kyle. We'll now hear from Anthony Zambito. Anthony.
So the first thing that we should do in order to give our seniors peace of mind is secure the future for their children. Every parent wants their child to live a life better than what they had. And that's what the People's Party of Canada wants to do. The first thing that I would like to see happen is I would like to see long-term care homes allow visitors to come visit them again. Okay, let's take a rational scientific approach to COVID to allow for that, because the damage of not having family visit those seniors in those long-term care homes is devastating for them. It breaks my heart, it really does. We also want to cut taxes, as I previously mentioned. We want to reduce the size of the federal government so that families can have money. It'll free up money for themselves so that they can choose the senior care that is best for them, whether it be in-house, whether it be at a long-term care home, whether it be with a nanny present. The best way to take care of our seniors is to prepare the future for their kids and to make sure that they have the resources necessary to make the choices that they'll need to make.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny LaForestier.
So long-term care is a bit of a personal issue for me. Both my grandparents passed away in long-term care. I think it's high time that we look at taking care of our seniors properly. These places are often just understaffed. The people are overworked. There's often language barriers to care. I think that, we need to address our long-term care in Canada. We need to definitely step away from privatizing long-term care. I think they need to remain as public institutions, nationally looked after and monitored. The pandemic has definitely highlighted just how bad it is in long-term care, having to call the military to come in. We weren't prepared and thousands died. And this needs to be addressed. I think for seniors, it's very important that we look at pharmacare. I've been talking to many people at the door. They're very concerned that eyeglasses are no longer covered, that dentistry is no longer covered, that they are really struggling. And I think the federal government needs to have a look at this. We have an aging population. They need to be cared for and they need to be respected. They shouldn't be struggling. That is not the time of life when you should be having to count pennies and worry about your eyeglasses. So I think we can do a lot better, and we need to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post.
Thank you very much. Taking care of our seniors is more than just taking care of them financially, although the Liberal Party platform does talk about that with increases to the old age security as well as the guaranteed income security. However, what we need to look at is aging in place. More and more, we need to make sure that our seniors are safe at home and can feel safe at home. And one of the best ways to do that, as we saw during COVID, is to invest in our personal support workers. The personal support workers that we have are some of the biggest heroes that we saw through COVID-19, and they were perhaps one of the most mistreated. Personal support workers don't make a living wage. Oftentimes they're working precarious employment and being forced to work contract positions at multiple homes, which we saw during COVID. That was a disaster. The government, a re-elected Liberal government, has committed to raising the wage for personal support workers to a minimum of $25 an hour and training up to 50,000 new personal support workers. By doing that, we can really invest in our seniors by allowing them to age at home. The second strategy is to invest in our long-term care and making sure that regardless of where seniors want to age, that they can do so safely. So one of the strategies from the Liberal Party platform is to develop a safe long-term care act, which will protect seniors in their home or in a long-term care facility. So investing in our healthcare is about the best way right now that we can continue to invest in our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada will have the first chance at the next question. Anthony, if elected, how will you address systemic racism and discrimination in Dufferin County and Caledon?
That's a great question, Doug. Thank you for bringing it up. The People's Party of Canada, our members as well as our candidates, are avid constitutionalists. Now, what does our Constitution say? It says that every Canadian ought to be treated equally and fairly by our government, by everybody. They have the right to life, liberty, and not to be deprived thereof, regardless of their race, their sex, their gender orientation, their physical health disabilities, their mental health disabilities, and a whole other variety of topics. The People's Party of Canada will reinforce the ideology that Canadians are equal before the law. And we will not be, we will not be pandering to special interest groups. We will treat everybody as equal as our Constitution dictates for it. I think it is a beautiful thing that people who live in Canada are free, and we're all subject to the rule of law. One of the things that makes this country great.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
I think one of the first things we need to do is implement recommendations to begin dismantling systemic racism in Canadian institutions. We need to implement all the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need to implement all of the calls for justice from the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. We need to implement the recommendations of the report of the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent on its mission to Canada. Dismantle systemic discrimination in the federal civil service and policing and our institutions. We need to invest in community services, invest funds that are divested perhaps from police services and social and community services, which are more effective in preventing and reducing crime, strengthening individuals and communities, and creating a more just society. These will include alternative responses to mental health calls, investment in after-school programs for young persons, mental health support for youth and adults, and an increase in employment opportunities. We need to end the practice of allowing the RCMP to review and handle complaints made against it. We need to create a national standard for independent and accountable oversight of policing in cooperation with the provinces. We need to urge provincial and municipal bodies to implement those standards to ensure fairness and accountability in policing across the country. Develop a national standard for police use of force and work with other jurisdictions to ban certain kinds of force, such as chokeholds and neck restraints. We need to uphold fiduciary responsibilities, honor treaties, and respect all rights of Indigenous peoples. We need to uphold Canada's fiduciary responsibility, fulfill our responsibilities and agreements, honor treaties, and respect all rights of Indigenous peoples, including their inherent rights of self-government. Locally in Dufferin-Caledon, we need to be much more inclusive. We need to watch out for each other, watch out for our Muslim neighbors, and we need to care for each other in a much more respectable way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. Anyone who's worked alongside me in any capacity over the last number of years has known that I'm extremely passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion work. The Liberal Party of Canada has already implemented several measures since 2015 to really tackle anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and many other things. As we move forward, we need to continue to invest in marginalized communities in every way that we possibly can, supporting Black entrepreneurs, supporting our Indigenous people, and more than anything else, applying a racialized lens to everything that we do to make sure that we are dismantling the systemic racism that already exists in many of our pillars. By applying an anti-racism lens to everything that we do, we can move forward and include everybody in our society and in our policies. We want to make sure that nobody's left behind when we're looking at entrepreneurial grants, when we're looking at investing in the artists and journalism, making sure that our cultural sectors are rich with diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
I think we all have a role to play to making sure that we have the most inclusive society here in Dufferin-Caledon and all across the country. It's work that we each must undertake ourselves, but we also have to aggressively combat hate and aggressively combat hate crimes. We have to look at ways to enhance the criminal code sanctions for those who are engaging in hate crimes, because these are the types of things that are absolutely tragic. They destroy families and are incredibly hard with communities. all levels of government need to work together to make sure that we are making sure that our hiring processes are diverse, and we make sure that we are including people in the hiring process. And the government has a central role in doing that. We must make sure that all Canadians are treated equally. This is a fundamental principle in the Conservative Party. One of the things that we should have been done a long time ago is reversing the gay blood ban. It's actually in our platform. We are going to eliminate this. The Liberals have promised to do it for a very long time, and they have never done it. It's time for that to end. It's discriminatory, and it should have been taken care of a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada will have the first chance at the next question. Jenny, what is your party's position on vaccination passports for use in commercial establishments?
So my feeling is I support vaccination. I myself am vaccinated. I encourage everyone to get vaccinated. I think it's important that we get back to business and that our children get back to school. I think it's been a very long pandemic. And while I support vaccination, I do also understand that there are certain reasons why someone may not want to get vaccinated. Perhaps it's cultural, perhaps it's racial, perhaps it's a feeling that they're not ready for a vaccine. That being said, though, you need to take the precautions to make sure that you are keeping everyone safe. So if you are not getting a vaccine, you need to stay home. You need to mask. You need to social distance. You need to do all the things that public health is recommending that we do so that we can take care of each other. It's a civic duty. It's a responsibility we all have. And I really hope that everyone will get vaccinated so our kids can get back to school and have a safe start.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
Thank you very much. We need to finish the fight against COVID. That is absolutely clear. The Liberal Party does have a vaccine strategy that is out there to save lives. So you asked specifically, Doug, about commercial businesses. Is that correct?
Yes.
So when it comes to vaccines in commercial businesses, that is right now a provincial responsibility. However, a re-elected Liberal government has committed $1 billion to help the provinces to implement those processes, should they be interested in doing so. And they're also committed to tabling legislation to ensure that every business and organization that does require to have proof of vaccination is protected, that they won't have the fear of legal challenge. Now, when we talk about mandatory vaccination, there is a really key piece in this, and Jenny brought it up very well, is that it is our civic duty. We do have a duty to take care of one another. And the mandatory vaccination piece from a re-elected Liberal government will ensure that all federally regulated employees and federally regulated sectors will require vaccinations. So that will include travelers on interprovincial trains, commercial flights, cruise ships, and any other federally regulated vessels. In order to get through this fight with COVID-19, we need to take aggressive steps to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada. Kyle.
So I think this is a really challenging issue, and I agree with my colleagues who have said it's predominantly a provincial issue. What I think has been so disappointing in this election is how this has been turned into a wedge issue. It's been turned into something to divide Canadians. This is not what should be happening. I think we should have a vaccine passport for international travel because you're going to have it, and the federal government should absolutely be the ones who are leading the charge on that. There are many people I've heard from in Dufferin-Caledon that have wanted to travel and they haven't been able to. There's quarantines and other things. So we got to get that right. On the provincial level, I'm going to leave that to them to decide. But I'll say this. In talking to local and small businesses across Dufferin-Caledon, this is what I'm hearing. Kyle, how am I going to police this? If someone comes to my place of business, how am I going to determine if they have that? What am I going to do if they say I'm coming in anyway? What will happen to me if they come in and I can't stop them and I get fined? These are really challenging issues. And before we all rush to say this is absolutely what we should do, this is absolutely mandatory, I think we should have a pause and think about exactly how are we going to enforce this. Businesses have been through a really tough time through COVID. And the last thing they need now is more expensive, cumbersome regulation to tell them who they can and cannot have going into their stores or their businesses. With respect to domestic travel, we should have rapid tests for people. No one should lose their job because they refused to take a vaccine for all kinds of reasons. The Dufferin Board of Trade had a fantastic project where you gave rapid tests to businesses to test their employees. We can do that at the federal level and at federally regulated industries, and we're not going to force people to lose their jobs. It's the compassionate approach, it's the right approach, and it's the Canadian approach.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada. Anthony.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely an approach, but let me tell you what I think the Canadian approach is. It's so funny because in the last question, every candidate just talked about how much they're against racial discrimination. Yet here we are talking about discrimination based on whether or not you took this vaccine. Let's be clear here. Every Canadian has the right to bodily autonomy. They get to choose what goes into their body, what comes out of their body. We're getting to the point where vaccinated pedophiles will have more rights than an unvaccinated law-abiding citizen. It is not a fringe group of people who aren't getting vaccinated. These are your neighbors. These are your cousins. These are the parents you talk with when your kids are playing hockey. Average people will lose their jobs. This is a federal issue because federal employees are losing their jobs right now. Also, it's a federal issue because you have the Via Rail and you have interprovincial travel. People got to go to a federally regulated airport or train station in order to do that. I am the only candidate in this election. There is no division. I'm the only candidate in this election who will oppose vaccine passports at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. We just talked about how we want small businesses to get back to work. Well, a huge way to allow that to happen is to get rid of the vaccine passport and allow everybody, regardless of their vaccination status, regardless of their sex, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender orientation. Anybody who wants to receive services in this province should be allowed to receive, in this country, should be allowed to receive those services. Vaccine passports do not work. If they work, we wouldn't need these, vaccine passports are not going to end COVID. Remember, this is supposed to be 2 weeks just to flatten the curve. That's what the Liberals have told us.
15 seconds.
And Kyle Feedback, you say that you're not against mandatory vaccinations. If here we are implementing this vaccine passport, it sounds like you're saying you're for mandatory vaccinations without saying it. I'm tired of the hypocrisy, and so are Canadians.
Thank you, Anthony. Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada will have the first chance at our next question. So we have heard the party's platforms on a diverse range of issues. However, this riding deserves a leader who has more than a seat in their governing or opposition party. Discarding your party's platform, what makes you as a candidate the best representative for the communities of Dufferin-Caledon?
Thank you very much. I do love to put the party platform aside sometimes and just speak from my heart because that's why I chose to run. So the reason I chose to run is because I'm running for this community. I'm rooted in this community, I have experience in this community, and I've got a proven track record of leadership at a municipal level. Giving back to this community in a public service way is a really rewarding thing. And in order to have a strong voice in Ottawa, you need to have a strong voice that understands the diverse needs of this community. From our urban sectors all the way down to our rural farmlands, we need somebody who understands those diverse needs and who can advocate for all of the things that we need. Working at a municipal level has been a really unique experience for me, and it's given me a lot of eye-opening experience into what this pandemic has done, how this riding continues to grow. And as one of the fastest growing ridings in Ontario, we need a loud voice in Ottawa that's going to advocate for the things that we need. We need federal infrastructure dollars coming into this riding to support the growth that we are forecasted to have. We need federal infrastructure dollars to come in and support the green transit initiatives that we are going to be bringing into this riding. We also need a loud voice in Ottawa who's going to advocate for our farming community, that's going to advocate for rural broadband, and who's not going to let any of our people be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada. Kyle.
Well, it's been my great privilege to be your member of Parliament for the last 2 years, and what I committed to when I ran in 2019 is the same thing I'm committing to now. I'm going to be your voice, because being your voice in Ottawa is the job of being your member of parliament. So I did that. I held town halls to make sure I understood all the issues that were important to people all across the riding. Did I know much about farming when I started as the member of parliament? No, I did not. But do I understand that there's challenges with the BRM program? Yes, I do. Do I understand now that there are challenges with the export of milk products? Yes, because you know what I've done? I visited hundreds of farms, talked to farmers, understood the issue with the carbon tax on farm fuels for drying grain, understand the issues of subsidies for US farmers that are making Canadian products more expensive and harder to sell. Because that's the job of your member of parliament, and it's one that I take very seriously. I also think that I should know how I should vote on certain issues, because it's not always about voting how your party wants you to. If you look at some of the things that we've passed in Parliament, particularly with respect to farming, getting rid of the carbon tax on farm fuels, making it more affordable to pass down the family farm. I, of course, voted for those things because I believe in them. The Liberal Party didn't. They voted against them. So how can you be someone's voice when you're going to vote against things that are critically important to the number one employer, number one contributor to GDP? So, a vote for Kyle Seback, re-electing Kyle Seback. I'm going to work for you. I'm going to continue to be your voice in Ottawa, raise those issues, and make sure we solve the problems in Dufferin-Caledon.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you, sir. So, just to be blunt, I've lived my entire life in Dufferin-Caledon, okay? I went to St. John the Baptist, then I went to Robert F. Hall. I own a condo in Orangeville. I'm not going anywhere. I always say Dufferin-Caledon is God's country. God lives here. The reason why I'm running and why I think it's important for me to go to Ottawa specifically is because I represent millions of Canadians who are done with career politicians ruining their lives, okay? If I was in the studio, I'd say, look to my right. You got Lisa Post and you have Kyle Seback, who are career politicians. Kyle Seback has been in office for 6 years. He hasn't introduced a single piece of legislation. The taxpayer, the constituent watching this right now, needs to realize that MPs make $200,000 of your taxpayer money to represent you. I have been adamant in the freedom movement ever since it started. Ever since October 2020, I've been rallying for the freedom of Canadians, for the freedom of Canadians to make their own choice, for the freedom of Canadians to open their own business, freedom of kids to play sports, freedom of kids to go to school. I'm the type of guy who would go to Vimy Ridge and Juno Beach. In fact, I already did that. I know what Canadians have sacrificed so that Canada can be free. The reason why it's my name on the PPC ballot is because I wanted to run because I don't trust any other politician to represent the needs of the people of Dufferin-Caledon in Ottawa. We need somebody who's born and raised here, who understands the values of this community. And that's why I would be there. I'm completely qualified. I have my BA in political science. Je parle français. I speak French as well as Spanish. I have no doubt that if I was to get my seat in Ottawa, not only do I have the opportunity to voice the needs of Dufferin-Caledon, guarantee my political career would take off. Right now, I don't want to brag, but I think I got the potential to be Prime Minister one day. And it starts
seconds.
right here with this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
So, there's one topic we haven't talked about tonight, which I'm going to mention now, and I think this is the reason I'm running. It's the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. The federal government's historical record on affordable social housing is dismal and dire indeed. That is one of the reasons that I am running. I've been working this whole time, yes, with different organizations environmentally against the 413 highway, subdivisions and wastewater treatment plants that are inappropriately developed, that are really putting a burden on a lot of residents in Dufferin-Caledon. But, the big crisis here is that we need connected, affordable, sustainable communities. We need to stop subsidizing sprawl. We need to create accessible transit. We need to champion smart growth and public, value farmland publicly. We need more oversight and public consultation. We need to reduce corruption and protect our affordable housing stock. A lot of the responsibility is provincial, but the federal government needs to show leadership too and intervene with financial incentives. Under current regulations, developer permits, requirements for minimum size housing, greedy municipal development fees on house construction are all out of whack. There's nothing between a trailer park and $1 million house available. It's all about follow the money in municipalities, the province, and the federal government. We have seen virtually no success with the Trudeau government's policies to date, and parties are now suggesting policies that provide no real plan as to how promised monies would translate into real affordable housing. It's pretty much mumbo jumbo. Now we see Trudeau is contemplating actually taxing the sale of your principal residence, the very thing that the middle class has been working so hard to acquire. What many depend upon as their only safe, sound investment. How can the middle class in this country keep their head above water with this government? That's why I'm running. That's why I'm running for Dufferin-Caledon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada will have the first chance at the next question. Kyle, how will your party support the development and implementation of a national action plan on violence against women and gender-based violence that is comprehensive, intersectional, and well-funded?
Well, thanks, Doug. I think, first of all, what we've learned is there has been a very large increase in domestic violence over the pandemic. I think the statistics show around 54% intimate partner violence. We have to make a number of amendments to the criminal code to protect people from intimate partner violence. And we have an extensive platform that talks about the specific criminal code amendments that have to be made because it's too long. We all know stories, news stories, and in fact, in our own lives, people have been affected by this. So we have to look at number one, strengthening the criminal code to make sure that the people who are perpetrating crimes like this are actually serving some time in jail. Number two, we have to protect the people that are being abused. There has to be funding for shelters, funding to make sure that they can escape the violence. Number three, we have to look at ways to make sure that people who are engaging in this criminal behavior do not have access to weapons or firearms. We'd bring forward a firearms ban for someone who is charged with intimate partner violence. There needs to be a whole approach, both criminal code, financial support, and you know what? We need to look at a societal approach as well. We have to make sure that we're raising people who do not believe that this type of violence is acceptable in our society. Thanks.
Thank you, Kyle. Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada, it's your turn.
Thank you, and this is an issue that I stick with dearly. I live in a very maternalistic family. You know, most of my cousins are female. Most of my aunts and uncles. I got more aunts than I do uncles. The first thing that I want to do in this situation, we're currently living in a world where, you know, because of COVID and because of lockdowns, women are being forced to live with their abusers. If you're in a domestic abuse situation, number one, there's no guaranteeing that a women's health shelter will be able to service you. And imagine now, if these vaccine passports come into play, what that would mean if you're a lady who has been unvaccinated. That's right. That means that your abuser would have more rights than you would to go into these facilities. I agree. I think funding is a great idea. I'd like to see it take place. But I'd also like to live in a society where women who are seeking help can actually receive that help and won't be discriminated against. Another thing, too, police right now, we're seeing them, respond to service calls relating to demonstrations. We're seeing them respond to calls relating to, people not wearing a mask in stores. I want to clear the clutter from the police's radar, and I want them to actually focus on solving crime. And a big issue is domestic abuse. And it has been so elongated and so, it's been really built up throughout this pandemic. You got to think, at a time when gyms were closed, marijuana, alcohol, and cigarettes are readily available to everyone. Now, when you think about a domestic abuser, 9 times out of 10, a trigger is an illicit substance or alcohol. So, we just want to prioritize, Canadians being able to live their lives that they want to live. I think a huge thing that will decrease, domestic abuse will be to open up the economy, will be for the lockdowns to end, and it'll be so that women can get the help that they actually need without any barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we have Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
So the unfortunate fact is that most women suffer from abuse in silence. They are afraid to speak out, especially in rural areas. It can be difficult to access services, so we need to provide better for them. We need to have access to those public health services that will look after them, especially if there are children involved. It needs to be immediate and it needs to be safe. I think the current situation with the pandemic has probably highlighted this more than ever before when it comes to affordability and issues around access to care and health care. We need to make it better for these women who are isolated, who are perhaps alone, not having anyone to reach out to. I think this is a terrible time if you are going through an abusive relationship, and it has been a very isolating time for many people. And I think we can do better for those women and certainly for those children. We need more supports, and we need to get serious about, giving those families the basic livable income that they might need that would reduce a lot of those stressors. Certainly alcohol addiction and different mental health issues are paramount. They need to be supported, these families, and we need to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. Yes, the statistics do show that gender-based violence has increased rapidly through the pandemic, with women being trapped at home with their abusers. And there's a few components to this. So, number one, a re-elected Liberal government will continue to invest in gender-based violence strategies, specifically lifetime background checks to prevent people who have a history of abuse against their partners from ever obtaining firearms licenses. Also, red flag laws that would allow immediate removal of firearms from a person who is a threat to themselves or someone else. But going beyond those gender-based violence pieces specifically, and the gun violence specifically, is that we need to invest in mental health care strategies, and we need to invest in opioid crisis strategies. A lot of the gender-based violence that we see is a direct result of those things, and a re-elected Liberal government has already guaranteed to invest in mental health care and to invest in the opioid crisis by providing solutions for substance abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada will have the first chance to answer the next question. Anthony, increasingly, misinformation and alternative facts have impacted the environment of information sharing, specifically on social media. How would your party work to combat the spread of misinformation, and how would your party balance factual information with freedom of speech?
That is a great question. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to stop federal subsidizing of media platforms, as well as with the CBC, because what we're finding is, yes, there is a lot of misinformation out there, but what we're actually seeing is that big tech organizations, in combination with the mainstream media, is actually censoring voices. That's not something I appreciate. I believe that all Canadians have the right to free speech. And how do we combat hate speech? How do we combat misinformation? With more speech. Let's have good dialogue. Let's have good discussion. If someone presents misinformation, let's put forward the right information. We as individuals have the potential and have the capacity to do something like that. It is not big tech's role to determine what is hate speech and what is not. They are unelected. It is not right. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms absolutely guarantees every Canadian the right to freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, and freedom of expression. So for the federal government to police how Canadians share information, it is absolutely not responsible. And when it comes from misinformation, guys, I just want to, get you in check with reality here. Just because the government says something doesn't mean it's true. We have seen on Facebook, we have seen the government go against what the CDC has said. We have seen the government go against what the World Health Organization has said. They always talk about trusting the science, but here's the deal. Science is never a consensus. If it was, it's politics. There are two sides to every debate, and in order for the scientific method to take place, you have to have both sides of an argument. And if there is information on one side, you know what? I like to think that individuals have the capacity to figure that out for themselves. I like to think that experts have the capacity to figure that out for themselves. Just because you're declaring that you are smarter than somebody about a simple subject doesn't mean you are right.
15 seconds.
For every accredited scientist on the right side of the COVID debate, any debate, there's an equally accredited person on the other side of the table, and they deserve to be listened to as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
Thank you. So protecting democracy in the digital age is really important. I myself don't get my facts from Facebook, and I don't think there are two types of science. I think there's one type of science, and that's the science that we should be following. I think we need to enshrine citizens' digital rights, including the right to not be profiled online. Canada can follow the lead of the European Union and listen to the recommendations of our National Privacy Commissioner. Regulations must distinguish between demographic profiling and more manipulative psychometric profiling techniques. We need to reduce the spread of misinformation, support research and development to improve artificial intelligence, solutions for detecting misinformation, hate, and violence online, so that this content can be de-emphasized and corrected. Position Canada as a global leader in requiring companies who run large-scale online platforms to detect and prevent proliferation of misinformation, hold publishers of malicious disinformation to account. I think these are very important, especially we've noticed during the election. You know, the misinformation is just spreading like wildfire. It does nothing for our democracy. It's divisive, and I don't think it's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
Thank you very much. This is definitely a complex question, but a re-elected Liberal government has committed to introducing legislation within the first 100 days that would combat serious forms of harmful online content. So specifically, it would be targeted towards hate speech, terrorist content that incites violence. But what it does is it really holds the social media platforms accountable to the content that they choose to host on their site. So the legislation does have to recognize that there is a balance of freedom and for all Canadians for their freedom of expression, and it needs to have a balanced approach to tackle that. But hate speech is harmful and misinformation is harmful, and there needs to be something done to address it with the online world that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, I think we should look at this in two different ways. Number one, if we want to combat online hate, we absolutely have to. And there are criminal code consequences for promoting hate. It's actually in the criminal code. What we need to do is make sure that we are actually enforcing that. That's critical. We have to do it. But if we're going to talk about online misinformation, it's a bit of a murky subject. Who's the person that's going to determine that's not accurate information? Who are we going to empower to do that? I find that somewhat challenging. I do think that the social media giants have a role to play in this. And in fact, they are playing an active role in this. The Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister had one of her videos and tweets on social media labeled as manipulated media. So I think the social media giants are taking on the people that are engaging in misinformation. We should work with them to make sure that they continue to do that. Are we going to have a government body behind the scenes regulating all the content that's put on the internet? I personally find that somewhat unsettling. One of the issues in Bill C-10 that was just in Parliament was exactly that. There was an exemption for user-generated content. The Liberals took that exemption out and pushed the bill through Parliament, meaning anyone's user content could be regulated by the government. Who in the government? We don't know. Who's going to be on that committee? We don't know. So I think we have to be very, very careful when we're doing this. We should have experts determine how we do that, but we certainly shouldn't have the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister putting out manipulated media during a federal election.
So our last question, Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada, you'll have the first chance to answer. What actions will your party take to ensure that the recently enacted federal pay equity legislation is implemented?
So I think it's high time that everyone have equal pay. I think we have a leader in the Green Party, Anna Mee, who is one of the strongest women in politics right now. And if elected, she will absolutely make sure that we are, advancing equity in the House, at all levels of government and in every society, jobs, teaching, hospitals. We definitely need to have more equity, an equitable workplace. It's important for our children to see that we value women and people of color and all members of society equally. There's no time in 2021 for someone just being disparaging or not allowing someone a universal basic income for any reason, and it's way overdue. Frankly, I find it kind of shocking that this is still an issue in this election. It should have been done already. I don't know why we're waiting, and we need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next up, we'll hear from Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
This is one piece of legislation that I'm so excited about because it is way past due. This was a Liberal Party initiative, and it's one that's moving forward. It will be implemented immediately. So I'm really excited about that. Now, the other piece that falls along with women in the economy, and it's a really important piece, is we need to continue to build on the investment of women entrepreneurs as well. So that does take us a little bit out of the pay equity side, but when we continue to invest in women in the economy, what we're doing is investing in the economy overall. We know that women are some of the highest contributors in the economy, and we need to make sure that they have every opportunity to invest in our economy and invest back into our economy, being paid equitably. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we'll hear from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
The first thing I'm going to say is this. If Justin Trudeau hadn't called an election during the fourth wave of COVID-19, we would be back in Parliament and we would actually be working on this legislation. But Prime Minister Trudeau decided he could get a majority government and it was time to call an election. So that's a real problem. We should absolutely pass this legislation. But we have to go beyond that, and the Conservative platform talks about it. We want to have a national mentorship program for women and girls so that they can advance in the career of their choice. We want to mandate that federally regulated industries have requirements for hiring qualified female candidates. We don't want to just break the glass ceiling, we want to shatter it, and we are going to require federally regulated industries to do that, because it's not just about equal pay, it's about equal opportunity, and we are going to push forward with that after this election.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you. This is a great question. I think it's a great question to ask. It's just so funny. I'm hearing from the candidates now, but how come they were silent when the Ontario government was hiring mainly men to do nursing jobs in Toronto's hospitals? Nursing, of course, as we know, is mainly female. Not only this, but they were paying doctor wages. That's right. In Ontario hospitals, you had men working jobs and women working the same jobs, but the men were getting paid more. Interestingly enough as well, we need to remember that equality of equality of opportunity doesn't equal equality of outcome. People who work the hardest in this society are going to get by. It doesn't matter if you're male or female for that principle to apply to you. Anybody who has the drive will succeed in this country, will succeed in this economy. So I support any effort that, to have women and men, the gender wage gap, it shouldn't be the way that it is in the first place. Men and women are equal. We've already talked about this, how the CPC recognizes everyone to be equal before the law. It doesn't matter of your sex, doesn't matter of your gender orientation, as well as your sexual identity. Our government is just going to continue with that. I mean, this is something that was put in the Constitution in 1982. This is a principle that should be in place for the remainder of Canada. And if it's not, why isn't it? We need to ask that question. But anyway, so, we've heard politicians talk. Let's actually walk the walk, especially when it's happening right downtown in our backyard.
Thank you, Anthony. Following our speaking order now, each candidate will have a chance with 2 minutes for their closing remarks. So first up, we'll have Lisa Post from the Liberal Party of Canada. Lisa.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Kyle and Jenny and Anthony for participating today and for putting your names on the ballot. It's not for the faint of heart. I can't even begin to put into words what the last 18 months have looked like. Difficult doesn't seem like a big enough word, but impossible doesn't cover it right either. What we've learned through COVID-19 is that a government that puts people first is a pretty powerful thing. We saw that the quick response of the Liberal government, particularly during the early days of COVID, put money in the pockets of Canadians quickly and without red tape. Nearly 1 in 4 Canadians access CERB and were able to keep their households moving, and as a result, our local economy moving because of this federal support in a time of crisis. Now we're at a pivotal moment in Canada's history. We need to finish our fight with COVID-19 and then move forward for everyone. We need to support families and small businesses in Dufferin-Caledon and put housing needs at the top of our priority list. We need to fight our climate crisis, and even the climate experts agree that our platform is the best plan on the table. We need to close the gaps in our healthcare system with investments in better long-term care, mental health care, and by addressing the opioid crisis by providing better access to treatment for those who are struggling with substance abuse. We need to prioritize the needs of our seniors and veterans and continue our work towards truth and reconciliation. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I am the candidate that is rooted in this community. And this is your time, Dufferin-Caledon. With your vote, you have the opportunity to raise the bar. On September 20th, vote for Lisa Post. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we'll hear closing remarks from Kyle Seback from the Conservative Party of Canada.
I was first elected as your Member of Parliament in 2019, and it was an incredible honor. And as I've talked about tonight, I committed to do a number of things as your representative, and I kept every single one of those every single one of those promises. Whether it was holding town halls, whether it was speaking with my municipal counterparts, whether it was asking how I should vote on certain issues. That's what you're going to get with me. I'm going to be your representative, your vote, your voice. But as we look at how we're going to come out of the pandemic, Canadians and people in Dufferin-Caledon, we should look at which party actually has a plan to make sure that our economy recovers from the pandemic, that we have jobs and opportunity for all Canadians. We have that plan. Our plan will secure the future. One of the number one issues I hear every day is affordability. We have runaway inflation right now. Why? Because Justin Trudeau is printing money to finance his debt. It is leading to inflation levels we have not seen. We have a plan to combat inflation. Housing has become unaffordable. We have a plan for that as well. We're going to build 1 million homes. We are going to look at federal properties. The Government of Canada is the largest property owner in the country, and we're going to release up to 15% of that for housing. We're going to stop foreign buyers who are buying up properties, which often is money laundering. We've seen that from the investigative reports. These are the priorities of a Conservative government. We have to get Canadians back to work. We have to support small business. And I will work tirelessly to achieve those goals. I'm Kyle Seback, and I would love to have your vote on September 20th.
Thank you, Kyle. Next, we'll hear from Anthony Zambito from the People's Party of Canada.
Yeah, so thank you. It has been a pleasure debating this, and I commend all of the candidates for making their way to Rogers TV tonight. Truly fantastic, and it's just an honor to be on the ballot with such great candidates. One thing I want everybody to remember this election is that we aren't voting for Maxime Bernier. We aren't voting for Justin Trudeau. We aren't voting for Aaron O'Toole. We're voting for the best representative in Dufferin-Caledon. And I know for a fact that I would be the best representative that we have to offer. Here's why. The second I get into Parliament, I will be introducing legislation right away to cut MP salaries by 20%. In addition to that, I will make it illegal for politicians to accept pay raises during a pandemic, okay? I am like the millions of Canadians who are done with career politicians telling us how we need to live our lives to fit their agenda, okay? I'm the only candidate in this election and the only party in this riding that is actually advocating for freedom for you to do your own choice. The government exists to protect our human rights. And we got to remember who put us in this mess in the first place. The Liberal government spent billions of dollars on vaccines that do not work. You could still transmit COVID if you've gotten vaccinated. You could still die from COVID if you've been vaccinated. Every party in this debate tonight has talked about segregating their neighbors, their cousins, their family, their teachers, and their kids, because some of whom might not be vaccinated because they made that choice or because their religion or medical condition prevents them from getting vaccinated. I don't live in that type of country. The Canada that I know has been free since the day it was confederated and long before that. Okay? Canada is a country built on compromise. The people are done with the way these career politicians have been acting. The People's Party of Canada, this campaign, it's not stopping on election day. It's going to continue until Canada remains free again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we'll hear from Jenny Laforestier from the Green Party of Canada.
So, Anthony, in the words of Janis Joplin, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. I actually have things to lose, and so I think Canada is a wonderful country, but it actually has a lot of work to do. The federal government spending is huge. The debt is now over $1 trillion, and the Trudeau government is currently borrowing $424 million every single day. Lisa Post said that the Trudeau government is fiscally responsible given the massive spending on support programs due to the pandemic, but that's just not true. She needs to understand the difference between big spending and prudent and fiscally responsible spending. I'll give you just 2 examples. The Trudeau government delayed in ordering vaccines. The result was Canada paid twice what other countries paid. Second, in calling a selfish and unnecessary election, Trudeau is costing the Canadian taxpayer in excess of $500 million. That's in addition to the $500 million spent by Elections Canada 2 years ago to run the 2019 federal campaign. To consider that behavior as fiscally responsible is beyond belief. The federal government is notoriously slow in everything it does. Its idea of urgent is a year from now or later, and it doesn't much matter which of the old parties is in office, they are both slow. Today we are faced with many issues like the housing and climate crisis. The Liberal government's response to both of these, despite all the happy talk, is frankly stunningly inadequate. What Dufferin-Caledon absolutely does not need at this time on these issues and many others is another backbencher member of parliament from an old party. We have tried that. What we need is action. Action today on issues that are affecting our everyday life and our pocketbooks. We need a motivated MP who's not afraid to demand answers. What Dufferin-Caledon needs is an engaged and action-oriented MP who is not afraid to call out government and demand action on issues that just can't wait. I am that action-oriented person. I have proved that on many issues. I will demand action. I know I can make a difference. My name is Jenny Laforestier. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I want to congratulate all the candidates tonight on how well prepared they were. Sometimes it's a little more exciting for the people that are watching if that's not the case, but it was pretty obvious tonight that everyone had done their homework. Congratulate them as well on their deportment. We gave them a lot of rules to follow tonight, not only related to the debate, but COVID rules, and it was pretty easy to see that it's not that hard to put one of these off and on. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Thanks again to our partners, the Dufferin Federation of Agriculture and the CFUW Orangeville. A big thank you to Todd and his crew from Rogers TV behind the scenes who pull this off seamlessly, make people like me look really good. Several of the candidates will have a booth at our Dufferin Board of Trade's Think Local Market next Tuesday, September 14th from 3 to 7 at Fiddle Park in Shelburne. I encourage you to go there and ask them more questions. We would encourage the public to attend, meet the candidates in person, and support the over 50 local businesses and vendors that are participating. Details on the local market, as well as candidate bios and information, can be found on our website, www.dufferinbot.ca. And as I said off the top, there were several questions we didn't get to tonight, so we will get the written responses from the candidates and post them there. And if you want to watch this again, you can find it online. Thanks all for tuning in.
Hello, my name is Samantha Sanchez, and I am the NDP candidate for Dufferin-Caledon. I am a new lawyer practicing in the area of family law. I was raised by a strong single mother who always taught me to fight for a just society for all. And I am proud to be an NDP candidate because we believe in helping people right now. We are making commitments to you with actual plans in place that previous governments have failed to achieve. We want to make housing affordable for all. We believe everyone should have a right to a safe and affordable place to call home. Being a young person myself, the goal of one day owning my own home is simply unattainable. The new Democratic government has a plan to create affordable places to live in every community across the country. As we have all been reminded this past year and a half, our health should be our government's #1 priority. Did you know that Canada is the only wealthy country in the world with a universal healthcare system that lacks universal prescription insurance coverage? This is simply unacceptable. The New Democrats want to ensure that everyone has access to medicine, regardless of age, health, and economic status. We want to ensure that everyone has access to the necessary medicines and medical devices the same way that we currently have access to medical and hospital care, free at the point of care, financed by a public system. A healthy society is beneficial for all. Education. It is one of the greatest gifts that we can give each other, our children, and future generations. Educating the generations to come should be the government's #1 priority. The Liberal and Conservative governments have for a long time created barriers to quality education. Accessing education in the current system simply creates student debt and stress. The government needs to stop profiting off of student debt and eliminate interest rates on student loans. New Democrats plan to do this and will implement a system of debt forgiveness. I, myself, am a recent graduate with thousands of dollars in student debt. This is not beneficial for our society. I am a young person with goals and aspirations like many of you, and I believe the new Democratic government can build a better future for us all. I look forward to seeing you all at the polls on September 20th, exercising our right to vote.